Dziękuję serdecznie, Marku. Będę moderatorką.
Thank you very much, Marek. I'll be the moderator.
Tematu dzisiejszego spotkania. Maybe I will now switch to English because we have an amazing international team on this panel. Once again, the panel is titled Key Change on the Role of Women in the Music Industry in Poland and around the world. Marek briefly presented you, so maybe I will ask you to add a little bit more description to this presentation. What do you do in the context, especially in the context of gender balance activities in the music industry? Mary, maybe I will start from you.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks a lot, Magda, and thanks for having me here. So my name is Marie Foll. My pronouns are she, her, and yeah, I don't know if we do the full description, but basically, I don't know if there are anyone who is visually impaired, but I'm a woman with short hair, glasses, and I'm wearing a very colorful red tunic. So I work with KeyChange, and with the name of the panel, I was like, whoa, okay, we are really centered right here today. KeyChange is a gender equality initiative that has been active for 5 years, and we work globally with a start that in the European Union, and we are very thankful to Creative Europe for having funded us here to do that. We work on 3 main aspects. One is a talent development program for artists and for innovators in 12 countries to make sure that women and gender minorities are supported internationally and that they can grow and develop and connect. The second part is a manifesto for change where we advocate for gender equality in public policy and funding, and also on national level very much. And the third point, which is very well known by now, is a KeyChange pledge, where we develop an international community of festivals. That's where it started, but by now any organization in the music industry who wants to engage with gender equality, and they can commit to change in a relevant area of their work to make sure that gender equality is not left on the hand of the artists or on individual people, but that we reach structural change and that everyone takes responsibility within that work. So I was introduced as On The Move because I am the president of On The Move, and I will talk about this later today, but I am concretely with KeyChange one of the project managers and making sure that stuff happens according to plan, to put it very simply.
Thank you, Mary. Sally?
I'm here as a woman in the music industry. I always like to say that. And I'm an academic and a writer and a music manager, and I do international business affairs from the legal business affairs perspective. I've been working in the industry for 30 years, and part of the work that I do, I set up a group at the University of Westminster called Let's Change the Record in 2016 to work with women and non-binary, non-males to work in the space of music and technology. And really all the work that I do is about working towards a more equal and diverse cultural environment, what we call cultural creative justice, some aspects of creative justice within music. Yeah.
Thank you, Sally. And if I can add also, because that's quite interesting in your story, you were the first woman in the position of A&R
at Mercury
manager.
Records, at the time was the biggest record label in the world, in the UK.
And also the first woman leading a panel on gender balance that happened in Manchester many years ago.
Yes, many years ago, 1993 maybe, yes.
Thank you, Sally. It's great to have you here. Kate?
Oh, hello, thank you. It's lovely to be here. My name's Kate. My pronouns are she, her. And just for description, I am a woman in dark shirt, dark trousers, and long hair with lots of different colours in it, sort of browny, blondie bits. I'm head of programmes for a music development charity based in Manchester in the UK called Brighter Sound. We do a lot of work to support emerging artists and up-and-coming industry professionals, and a big programme of work with young people. Across this programme, we have a large focus on gender equality, and we've just been running a region-wide initiative across the north of England to support women and people of marginalised genders to get into music careers, and that's across the board, from sort of education, so early education, and working with schools through to talent development, and working with early and mid-career professionals as well. Alongside this, I've also written up a PhD around gender in music, and that's been a sort of practice-based piece of work, exploring what the inequalities are that exist, but also looking at what we need to do to make change.
Mm-hmm. And your PhD covers mostly UK.
Yeah, it's predominantly a focus on the UK, again taking that sort of more holistic perspective, looking at what we learn at education, the way the curriculum's shaped, and how that sort of informs the outlook that people carry forward throughout their education into the professional workplace.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Aga?
Hello, my name is Agnieszka Wojciechowska. I'm program director of Different Sounds Festival. And as a Different Sounds, in 2019, we signed KeyChange Pledge, and we declared that we would achieve gender balance in our lineup, festival lineup, till 2022, and we did it last July. Yeah, I'm very proud of it. Next year, 2 years later, in 2021, we became the Polish partner of the network. And this year, in 2020, in July, for the first time, we organized the KeyChange Lab in Lublin during the festival. And we invited artists and innovators, and also we created, together with Magda, a design thinking workshop about inclusivity in the Polish music industry. And it was great meeting for people from different areas, different places in the music industry, for artists, for managers, for agents, for bookers, for staff from institutions. And we will continue this discussion tomorrow.
And today, thanks, Aga, for mentioning the workshop, because I won't hide that I have a little agenda in our discussion today, because we, especially after the workshop at Different Sounds, that was also sort of a research workshop, like making a diagnosis, what is the current situation of gender balance in Poland. And unfortunately, we are far behind some countries that made essential progress. So my goal is to help participants of the conference, our viewers, people who are here with us, to make the topic of gender balance or gender inequality or equality more tangible and more close to what we all experience, and what refers to the whole system of the music industry, all parties, not only women. So I would like to start from some personal experiences, because you all are dedicated to activities for gender balance. So I'm very curious, what kind of, in your professional or personal life, what kind of situations, events, moments was a strong realization of gender balance topics that made you more engaged into some movements or projects or initiatives? What do you recall? I imagine that there is a lot, so please pick the one that is the strongest one, or you remember like that was something that really made you more active.
I mean, it's a difficult question to answer because indeed there are many different levels where you can look at this inequality. I think for me, and I've been working in the cultural and creative sector for a long time and not so long in the music industry, but I've been in the audience for a very long time. And there are some traumatic stuff that happened to me at music festival within the audience. And this is also something where I was like, okay, this is not possible. And it is because I was young and because I was a woman, definitely. And it's stuff which I promised myself, like, if I can do anything within my professional life to just alter this and make sure this is not normal and that there are ways to protect people and to make events safer, to make it enjoyable for all, and and that I have the right to be at a music festival and not feel threatened in any way, then I can do that. And I got the opportunity to work on KeyChange in 2019, and before that I've been working much more on the international spectrum and traveling alone a lot, and all of this being alone, being isolated, which is the reality of a lot of artists when they are touring, for instance. I could relate to a lot of stories that were being said, a lot of stuff that has been made public also during Music 2 in France and different Me Too movements as well. So without going into specifics, because again, that I don't necessarily want to expose all of this in that way, because it can be traumatic for other people as well to listen to. This is a great motivator to just keep it on my mind on a kind of concretely, if I manage to do a tiny bit of real change, that will have a massive impact on so many people, both on stage and in the audience, to be able to just enjoy the music that is produced, the life that we want to live, and be much more free and included in that process.
I think for me, like any one moment, I think what I call everyday sexism is a kind of ongoing environment that we live in. But I think that when I started, I've always done activist work, and I've always been very involved in doing that as a young teenager. In my high school, I wanted to introduce education, reproductive education about the pill and having contraception, and it got into the national newspapers. So I have a track record of doing these things. So, obviously, bodily control, women controlling their bodies, is a very important point in any working circumstances. But I think when I got really motivated, when I came out, mostly I've been working in the commercial music world and popular music, and so I'm always working with men. I was always the only woman in the room. And then when I came to a university, in a music department, I was the only woman in a room. And I was like, no, this is a school. There's a women at what? Why am I the only woman in the room? By 2016, really, I just had enough. Also hearing what the students were saying to me, the kind of repeating a very normalized gender equality just going on all the time in the music space. Who's in the studio? Who's got the microphone? I'm like, this is a place of education. And in a way, of course, informed by Occupy, informed by Me Too, I decided that we would with a group of women, we will occupy the recording studios within the university and just take them over and just be in them as only women in this technological, the recording studio. We have incredible equipment at the University of Westminster. And so for me, I'm like now we pay to go to university. Every one of my female students is paying for that equipment, and they don't get to use it, right? But they're paying for it. So I'm like, sorry, I just really had enough. It just was really in front of me, And I thought, okay, this is what I'm going to do. The reaction of the other male music academics was horrific. And I think when I say I've managed a lot of bands and I've worked I've put on illegal raves in the Pyrenees Mountains, and in the commercial world, you would just have an argument. You would just shout and scream at them, and I would fire them anyway. Because if they were on my team and they behaved like that, I'd fire them. But you can't do that when you work in a public institution. But to understand the layers in which what I was saying was like, oh my God, what is she saying? I'm like, what are you talking about? It's 2016. They're like, whoa, you can't. I was like, what are you? It was so incredible that then we wrote papers about it. Then I started to go to conferences. Suddenly my kind of world of just talking about gender and inequality in music just really, really opened up in a funny way. In a way I was like, actually, this is so bad. And now, within a year, I made so many connections with other academics, with teachers. Like, God, how long? That's what I feel. I feel like there is a moment of how long can this, enough is enough.
Mm-hmm.
We have at the moment saying in England, enough really is enough, right?
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Kate, what was your experience?
I must say the process of writing up my PhD has been a real sort of, a real journey reflecting on my own experiences as a musician growing up and studying and in the sort of rehearsal rooms or, little sort of gigs that you first start going to on a local level and really recognising the male dominance of all those sort of scenes and spaces right the way through my sort of, formative years. And then I think a big catalyst for me was becoming a parent. And I remember coming back to work from maternity leave, and Brighter Sound is a sort of funded organisation. We receive public funding, so we often have to do a lot of evaluation around our work. And I was looking at the statistics around participation, and I was just really struck for the first time by how male-dominated all our projects and programmes were, and it was an average of 25%. It was around 25% female participation to 75% male. This is going back a few years. We weren't capturing data around other genders then, which obviously we've rectified now. And I just thought that then was representative of what we saw when we were at events. When we were if we're programming stages and putting artists on, it was that imbalance that was reflected in everything we did. And so I had another enough is enough moment, and I was just like, right, we need an entire strand of our work that's dedicated to supporting women and sort of young women and trying to sort of get a gender balance back across our programme of work initially is how it started. But then as I sort of started to research more broadly, I realised that this problem wasn't just about Brighter Sound projects. They mirrored much more widely across the entirety of the industries.
Some time ago, I realized that usually negative aspects related to gender are so soft, so delicate, and it's very hard to explain to other people. In that way, they don't think that I'm oversensitive, over emotional, but I think that it might be not so huge situation, but the most common and repetitive situation when people perceive me as Raffles, my festival partner assistant, even when I introduce myself as a program director of the festival, but it's automatically. So, and after that, we found KeyChange as a network, and we thought that it's a good occasion to create discussion in Poland and start public exchange of thinking.
Thank you. And like you mentioned, the many situations that happened in your younger age, and then later when you were working professionally in the music industry. And since then, a lot have happened. Many projects, many initiatives. We gathered a lot of data. At least in some countries, because in Poland we still don't have proper data about gender balance in the music industry. I hope it's still ahead of us.
I think
very
no
close.
data.
So there is a lot going on, and people who have open eyes and open ears, they see how many projects and initiatives there are on the market. And what is your main focus and main goal at the moment? Because there is so much to do. Also, just hearing your stories. And we cannot do everything at the same time. So I was wondering, where are you now with your work, and where is your focus? Where are your goals in gender balance activity?
Taking over the world, like just one day at a time. It's tricky. So, I mean, with KeyChange, we have European funding, as I was saying. So our work plan has been written back in 2018. The world has changed a million times since then. We have gone through COVID. We are going through an inflation at the moment, which is impacting a lot of countries in Europe where we work with. All of this is just something we have to face as an industry and within society generally. And so we are always, with KeyChange, we're always trying to reassess like the priority while respecting the work plan we wrote, because we got public money and we do need to deliver what we said we would do. So this tension is very present at the moment in our work. So concretely, we are continuing to support individual talents. We have an open call at the moment also for anyone listening from Poland. Please do take a look, because Magda was one of our participants, for instance, or Tamara as well, who is putting this conference together and will be speaking in another panel. So, I mean, we have brilliant people, also artists who are taking part. So we continue doing that work. It's also just not stopping what works, the connection, the network, and making sure we can support.
After the program, it's even better.
Exactly. And that's what one of the priority of what we want to work on at the moment is making sure that alumni, so people who have gone through 1 year of program, are supported on a longer term, because if you're part of a network once, you do want to continue belonging to it, you want to be able to engage, and we want, as a movement, to be able to support you through that. So that's one of the priority we are working towards, to make sure that this is done with all the ideas that are there from our participants who have experience in that, who know the power that it is to come together and be able to connect and exchange with your peers in a respectful environment. So that's one of the things we work on. The other one, because we've been called out, and rightfully so, we are working also on operating our program in a more intersectional way, to make sure that gender inequalities is not the only focus of what we do. Well, it is at the core and at the bottom. I mean, it's everything around the mission of KeyChange, to make sure that gender equality and gender equity becomes a reality in the music industry. But while you work on one aspect of diversity, you can't forget the rest either. You can't just focus like, no, it's only about women and gender minorities, and the rest, whatever, someone will do it. So I think like making sure we don't become too isolated and too much in our corner, but continue linking up with others, especially when it's on intersectional approach. I mean, you talked about parenthood. This is a topic that's always been there. KeyChange is very wide, because on how we started, this is something we want to address, also both in our participants, which are usually really diverse, but also in different ways. LGBTQI rights are also very important to us to make sure that, again, like the music industry, if we become gender balanced, we need to be able to work on all those aspects as well and support each other in all the diversity that exists. And last but not least, because again, I started saying we want to take over the world, and we are doing that. It's really just
the question was about the main focus. It
I know,
seems
right?
that you're very busy, Mary.
But this is this is what we do. But this is also where we expand and we work with other people. We received support to develop in the US. And I think having major markets tackling gender diversity and really engaging with it will make a change in the rest of the music industry. Might be wishful thinking. I hope not, but this is also one of the aspects that we are going to work on. Indeed, the main focus still on the coming months.
Yeah, and it shows what you mentioned before, that it's so multi-layered that when you start to work on one area, you like discover so many connections, and you need to do it in a more systemic way.
Yeah,
right?
but what I just want to add on that as well is that we don't do it alone, obviously. I mean, indeed, it's our main focus, but we work with partners, we try to support other organizations, we try to link up as much as possible and use the platform and the name we have managed to get to make sure that other people can do the work that they do, that other, and especially activist movements get supported, get the recognition, because we can't do it alone. We are extremely ambitious and we do a million things and it's layered, as you say, so we try also very much to make sure that whatever we do, we can also uplift others and try to fundraise also for them, or try to include them in the movement we create, or that has been going on for a while.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think for me, during the pandemic, I started a new piece of research, which was with, my alumni that make up the global majority, people, African, Caribbean, part of, what makes up modern London, but also what is post-colonial. So I started this piece of research that was, I basically contacted non-male alumni from across that whole othered part of what we call the non-standard music industry worker, and it was very, very interesting reaching out to people and saying, okay, what does this moment feel like for you? Because there was a lot of things going on, emotionally going on, and as you know, part of the work that I do is looking at the psychosocial impacts of inequality and working in music. So they all intersect, and that's where my focus is now. My focus is also in, I mean, when I started working in the music industry, when I became a manager, I was working for another manager, and when I broke out on my own, I had 4 children, including a 9-week-old baby. So I have always worked as a parent, and when I went to Mercury Records, I was only there a few weeks, but it was a school holiday, so I brought all the children in. And they were like all in my, all in my room. And the head of A&R walked in and he was like, "What is this, a kindergarten?" And I said, "No, David, this is a place of work without a creche." And I have never worked in a place with a creche in the last 30 years, BMG, in the 90s, BMG in the UK, which is a German record company, had a creche. This is so 90s. They closed it down and turned it into a gym, which I think really reflects what was being thought about as a priority. But for me, it's to work at that intersection. It's also to work, to really confront the ageism of the music industry, which, and also bringing people back into work, because I think that one of the things we can see from the data is that at 35, women float away like invisible objects, like butterflies. And actually, what does the environment need to be to bring them back? Parenting is a political issue, as most of these things are. So that's really where my focus is now, and that's what I'm looking at.
I suppose I've got two areas of focus at the moment. Firstly is in relation to the All Things Equal manifesto, which is a manifesto that we sort of created over the last 5 years of working with women and people of marginalised genders from across the north of England. So this manifesto's been crowdsourced through hundreds and hundreds of voices who've come to different events we've done, participated in different projects, contributed to consultations, and that brings together sort of 5 main themes, where we sort of see changes required. And it also sort of looks at different levels in which change is required as well, and that's about.
Kate, can you mention these areas, because I think it can be inspiring also for us. Like, where do you look for the areas for change?
So they're common themes, I think, that you hear in the discussion around equality, but they're still, to me, the most pertinent themes. So education's one area. Talent development and sort of artist progression, live music and how that operates as a workplace, and that connects to
what is happening on the scene and behind the scene on the backstage,
particularly
the technical
around
equipment, production.
And safe space working as well, a big part of that. Leadership and the importance of diversity in leadership in order to influence change in other areas of the system, and also parenthood as well. So they're the 5 areas, and so we're just keen to sort of share the sort of learning and where that's come from, and talk about it at different events and conferences, so sort of advocating for change in relation to that. And then secondly, in relation to sort of my programming work, it's over the last 5 years of running an equality initiative, it's really sort of strongly evidenced the value in creating alternative spaces for people who are marginalised to come together and experiment with different ways of doing things, and that it can be a liberating space, a safe space, and an opportunity to sort of bypass some of the expectations and practices that might have been considered unsafe, or in terms of what is expected of you from the industry. So we've had a big focus, as I've said, on sort of regionalism and gender, which I've been happy to lead because that's sort of my lived experience. But as you've both said, it also opens up all those other inequalities that intersect. And so at the moment, I'm working with specialists and steering group who've got lived experience or expertise in and around disability. So I'm working with artists who are women or people of marginalised genders and identify as deaf, disabled or neurodivergent, and also with specific groups who identify as trans and non-binary, and we're looking at creating alternative development spaces for those artists as well. Initially just as a sort of pilot project to test the value in it and to sort of better understand how that needs to be structured and shaped to be effective, but with hopefully a view to sort of some longer term development in those areas as well.
At the moment, we are working on, of course, a lineup for next year's edition of the festival, and we are very often discussing about wider general public discussion about equality, about gender balance in Poland. Now we know more than before our workshop, and the question is what we can do and how to involve people to this movement that is starting now. You are talking about engagement, and maybe people who are watching us right now do not see that half of our audience is missing.
So when we were talking about streaming and money, and like you were probably here on 2 panels before, we had people here, and now when we were talking about gender balance, like we have some few people missing. And only women are here, so...
And Rafael.
Great KeyChange partner. Okay, so this is the fact, and I will add with my next question some statistics, because I think the having some numbers in mind shows what is the situation and helps imagination to work. The data that we have are from KeyChange database. So if you want to know more, you can jump into keychange.eu website. So, for example, those are recent data. 2020, in 2020, 20 artists in the Billboard 100 charts were women or gender minorities. So 80% were men. 29% is the average pay gap at major record labels in the UK. 84% members of the KeyChange partner country SMOs on average are men. To make a comment about it, so organizations, festivals that are signing the pledge, we mean these people in these organizations, in these festivals, mostly men are in charge. Do I get it well?
Yeah, so very often, in leadership position, you have a lot of men. When it comes also to festival, even in our festival partners, the one that work the closest with KeyChange, you may have sometimes, so we have 13 we work with. I don't have the numbers in mind. I should have checked that before. I think we have 1 or 2 that are led by women. Some are co-led by women, and all the rest are. Yeah. Basically the people having the decision-making power are men.
Yes.
But when it comes to CMOs, those are statistics. In any case, for Europe, where I've been looking at it a bit more, so ZAIX and all the others in other countries, and I was looking at the stats for the Netherlands, where I used to live. For the Netherlands, Bumra Stemra has, that was a number from 2018, they have 14% of their members identify as women. And that's the absolutely normal number. So it's always between 10 and 20%. Same with PRS for music. It's the same with all of them, SACEM as well. But what's interesting with that number is that then you can have a discussion with those organizations, because they're like, well, that's strange. Maybe there is a market for us to grow in women. I'm like, yeah, okay. Like if the economic argument works on you, great. Let's talk and let's try to grow your membership.
You take those statistics, which is what we do when we compare with education systems. What I learned from coming into a music department, apart from I was always working in, the kind of front end of dance music, really, very much anyway. But when I came into a music department in a university, in a college and school of art, half of the students are women. So I'm like, okay, the only thing you can do to better your career is change gender now. That's like, and if you add race into that or whatever, it was very, very challenging when you look at these statistics, because that's one sense. But when you see the ambition is there, they arrive at university or in music colleges wanting to do this. What happens to them then? If you start to confront that question. If we
talk about artists, I need to add one data, because this is like quite shocking, and I left it.
There are so many of them. Seriously, I'm like, okay, come on, bring that.
95% of works performed by major global orchestras in 2020-21 were by men.
Yeah.
So I have a question about this data, because gender balance projects movement is not long, but still a lot have happened in the last decade, and we still those data are from 2020-22, And what do you perceive is like the biggest challenge in the process of change? Like what is, when you analyze this from a wider perspective, what is stopping us as a society to change these numbers?
Well, when I started as a manager, this speaks exactly to this thing, but when I started working as a music manager, I was also at the same time putting out records because it was the start of the rave scene in the late 80s. And I later trained to law, but then I didn't know about law. But I'd have women turning up and they'd say to me, oh, I went into the recording studio, I sung this vocal, that record's in the top of the charts now, but I only got £20 as a fee. And very quickly, I worked out that their copyrights were being removed from them. And then I would speak to the guys in the band, say, oh, you know, this woman came to see me, she said this, and they went, yeah, she was only the singer. And that goes on to that, you know, and so it isn't just why I'm saying that this is such an important point, because if you think about the infrastructures of music, it's not just the performance, it's not, all of this comes back also to authorship, to what we're talking about, copyright. Copyright is the underlying infrastructure of the ways in which money and power is distributed within the music ecosystem. And if women have been systematically not involved in that, you know, so that Kate Bush can be the first woman ever to have written and produced her own record because it was on Stranger Things in 2022. She becomes the first woman to have topped the charts with a record that she made herself ever. Right, it's 2022. That is a pretty shocking. It's a great song. It's a pretty shocking statistic, right?
So it's about we are at, in the area of legislation and like structure, fundamentals, and also like getting people involved in
and changing normative. What is perceived normative behaviours? You know, so women. In a studio setting, that's why to me occupying a studio was such an important and symbolic thing, was to women are in the studio, and within the studio they can be used, their voices can be used, but they're not fully there. There to connect to the royalties, they're not there to connect to production.
Yeah, in the theory of the processes of change, there is a lot interesting insight into types of resistance. So there is a group of people that is like resisting the change, not because there is a open no to some kind of changes, but it's just about not being aware and not seeing what the situation looks like. So it's like a passive resistance or stopping the process of change sometimes. So it's like sometimes waking up people like to see like the situation.
Oh yeah, but one of the things that I teach IP, you know, so one of the things that I do is deconstruct the rights in every song. And I do it with the students because I get my students to make songs, and it's really interesting because I arrive every year and I have envelopes, and inside the envelope are instructions to make the song that I have written. I give them out to the student groups. They make a song, they record it, they never mention me. Because they've made it. And they're like, but we made it. I was like, no, you didn't. I gave you instructions. And they were like, so I think a very interesting thing happens even in the setting of creativity where, you know, people say my song's my baby, or my, there is a kind of connection, which I think plays into some of the conversations about the metaverse, how in the virtual world, how our intimacies may change. And all of these are changing behaviors. There's kind of interesting, but I think there's a kind of intimacy connected to creativity.
Yes, that's true.
Is about social reproduction and reproduces normative behaviors. And it's very difficult to crack those because we are sort of because we've been taught them so well that, you know, I will walk into a studio and go, oh, I don't know. And I'm like,
Like
that's-
repetition is also like part of our human nature,
yeah,
unfortunately.
habits.
What would you add to this little list of change toppers? What?
It's so what you were mentioning about awareness and this visibility. I think that that played a big role also with KeyChange. I mean, back in 2017, with a festival saying like, okay, we will just commit to making it on stage to show that it's actually possible and it's not the end of the world. I mean, really going with this sort of, okay, I will commit to it. Or, yeah, it wasn't necessarily the most active and from an activist point of view, but just on a kind of, okay, let's make a proof of concept, which has developed into a full movement, which is beautiful to see. But the idea at first, and that's also how Alex Schultz from Reeperbahn Festival at times speak about it, is like, if I have to impose a quota on my bookers for 2 years so it becomes normal for them to look differently at how they book, I will impose a quota on them as a festival director. A lot of festival directors, a lot of bookers and so on, they're like, yeah, quotas, don't come to me with that. But for him, it was like, I want to, first of all, train my team in a different way, that they have to be forced to just like open their eyes to the diversity of the music industry. So we renew our booking and we are also much more relevant to the music industry, but also for him, very much on the social relevance of a festival, like our audience wants to see different things, and the more normal it becomes to see different type of bands on stage, the easier it will become to book them as well. So for him, it was really on a kind of, if quotas are the way for a couple of years, and not as a permanent solution at all, but if it's something to put in place for 2 years, I'm definitely willing to do it. And that has, and that's his perspective. And again, I'm not necessarily pro quota either, but it's more on making it visible, making proof of concept, making it clear that it doesn't take a revolution. It's not about, it is challenging the status quo. It's not going as usual, and we all want to go back to normal, and we want to go back to life. I mean, we have heard this so much for the last 3 years, but there is really just this idea of making it possible, showing that it's possible, showing that it doesn't take effort, and that actually you make money through it, that you have a much more relevant lineup. And again, I'm talking about festival, but it goes with a lot of different parts of the industry too. That you have, that your audience shows up for those shows, and that, yeah, it is really possible. It's a social engagement, but it's also it has an economic value. And this is quite interestingly where, at the moment with KeyChange, we are starting to have more conversation with the recording industry, where they are really curious about KeyChange from really the bottom line kind of perspective on, hey, we are like, yeah, struggling in this and that. Maybe diversity is the way to go. We're like, okay. Sure, let's investigate this.
There's a lot of things going on. You know, I'm very involved in UK music industry, the London music industry, which would be a better, more precise description. And it's very interesting because I have worked closely as working with case studies on big female artists from Savages, the rock band Savages. Jenny Beth, I managed her for years before that band. Well, I was part of bringing that band together actually, and then with Dua Lipa and some other. So I watch female signed artists. So I'm talking about people that are signed to major record labels here, not DIY artists. And it's very interesting to see, if you start to watch that very closely, what happens in the, you know, and we've got quite a lot of interesting information circulating now in the UK, and we've got different artists really talking, Charlie XCX, and there's just various people talking out in a way that they didn't do before. So I think that's an interesting change, is to hear this younger generation of women talking in a way that I think quite often for previous generations, not only was it not maybe fashionable, but also they were concerned, you know. So I think that the collective conversation about the position of women and inequality in general that has been circulating has empowered women and to speak out, you know, which is good. Which is,
and to come together. Sorry
yes,
for
come together
interrupting.
and speak out. Yes.
It's a point I wanted to bring up as well, because one of our innovators in France, Émilie Gonneau, together with a lot of people, especially during the pandemic, because people have just had time and just have had the realization on how they were working and thinking about it. She has had issues in France due to gender inequality and, I mean, massive lawsuits, this kind of stuff. But anyhow, she brought up a group of people under the label of Change de Disque, so change the records in France, and a kind of bottom-up initiative, and it resembles also all the work that you do, also collecting those bottom-up voices and coming together. And I see that in a few countries, and it's just so inspiring to see that this movement from the bottom up and from people who are working at majors, who are working at a lot of different places, but is really coming together. And to come back to Change de Disque, what they did, and it's really an informal collective that started now as an association, and the idea is to educate each other, to know your rights as an employee, as an artist, and as a freelancer. So they made different working groups for those 3 different areas. There are men and women and non-binary as well in those groups. It was just all done remote. And it was really interesting, because then it was, okay, trying to map like all the situation where someone can exert power over you when you don't know your rights. And it was really from this perspective on, okay, the problem is not necessarily even gender inequality. It's just because you don't know, and because you are not equipped, and because when you start in the music industry, or even if I look how I started, I've never been trained in the music industry. I come from the culture sector, more generally public sector and so on, and then I end up there and I'm like, okay, I don't even know what I'm supposed to do, and I'm a freelancer, so there is no backup, there is no HR. What do I do? And to have those groups in different countries coming together and really doing the work, mapping everything, again, going beyond gender inequality, but on knowing your rights, knowing how power is exerted and how you can challenge it, but from a safe position, also really knowing like how to find backup, what is possible to do. That's been quite interesting to see how this is a way indeed to just make a small step and map the things that will be helpful to you, but will be helpful to the generation in front of, well, the next one to come, but also the people who have been in the industry for 10, 15, 30 years, and who still just know this ad hoc, and they know vaguely how it works, but they don't even know exactly what the law says, or how, and then to change those laws that don't work.
This is really interesting, because I asked you about the challenges, but you are so good in changing challenges into examples of action and positive change. Like this is great. I have one question, and I think it will be our last question. That will be like somehow continuation of what you are saying. But before that, I just need to ask Aga, because I think this we are in Poland, we are in Sopot, so I need to also refer your experience also in European area. This much more developed, has much more infrastructure supporting gender balance activities. So what is the challenge in the process of change in Poland? Like, what do you think, like, is the force that is really not supporting us at this moment? Like, I just have a feeling that we really need to understand also what are our threats to make a positive change.
Now we don't have any structures, so I think that we need policies, we need good examples from more experienced countries, partners. We need kind of catalog of good examples that can show people how step by step change something in the music industry. Because now we're at very beginning of our way, and it's even hard to create steps. What should we do firstly? So I think that's that we need it the most now. And now we are in very interesting interesting point, because after pandemic, I think that this new times, new area gives us some points to change something, but we can see that a lot of people now is dreaming to be back to 2019. They are thinking about big names, big shows, big concerts, and which leaves very little room for non-commercial, not so well-known names, and it's a pity that it looks like this.
So I have, unfortunately, last question, because there's so...
But we have a workshop tomorrow, so, you know, like...
Yes, and we will be designing first steps, so don't worry, Aga. Like, we will do something about it. My last question, and unfortunately I have to ask for a brief answer this time because of our time limitation. I need to use here an interesting a quote from Shirley Manson from Garbage band. I'm not sure if younger audience know the band, but Shirley Manson is the KeyChange ambassador. That's correct, right? And she said, "I remain utterly outraged by the depressing statistics surrounding female representation in every aspect of the global music business. We must put it to right. We are doing a great disservice not only to women of all races and socioeconomic backgrounds, but to all genders, culture, and society in general by allowing the status quo to continue." And I think this quote is quite powerful because I really truly believe that we really need to engage not only women into action, but like it's said, also we really need to men on like audience, even like on events like this, and sometimes I think that we in gender balance discussions we talk a lot what we are missing and what we need to do still, what is still not working. And I wanted to, at the end, to think about like what will be possible if we will really have a balanced music industry, because I think that sometimes people just are afraid of change, and it's not something natural psychologically for some people. Like change is stressful. Like if someone wants more of something, like it means that someone will get less, you know. So it builds like the narration of fear. So I would like to jump into the beautiful future when the music industry is balanced and think about like what we're fighting for, like what will be possible for us.
We'll be able to dream in whole new dreams. I mean, if we lived in a the patriarchy was over and we lived in a gender equal society, we don't know what we're capable of dreaming because we've never been there. We've never been able to imagine anything outside of that matrix. That matrix dominates our thoughts and how we live in the world every day. And so for me, it's about, that would be the impossible dreaming. Like, what would it be to dream that? I don't know, but it isn't something it's not work I could stop. You know, it's not work I could, it's work I will continue.
Good.
I think it's really interesting that we've talked about the influence that progress is having on younger generations coming through and how that is opening up more possibilities for people. And ultimately, I totally agree with Shirley Manson's quote that it's for the good of everyone, really. And it's about opening up possibilities, and it's about realising aspirations. But what's sort of fundamentally really important from a gender perspective, I think, is that it's about doing it in an authentic way, being an artist in a way that is right for you and not conforming to the ways in which you think you should or, you know, could be doing because of sort of stereotyping or, you know, past the ways in which you've been, you know, dissuaded to do things or encouraged to do things by those around you. So I think and I think fundamentally then that's about self-fulfillment. It's been about being happy in your work, enjoying your work. It's about well-being, all those things that are really important, that when you're constantly in a situation where you're having to swim against the tide, conform to something that you're not, pretend to be, the artist that you're not, or in whatever line of work you're in, that's when all those other sort of challenges emerge more strongly. So yeah.
And thank you for mentioning that, because I think that is getting into roles that are not ours is concern not only of women and gender minorities, but also men who are tired with the roles and that the culture made for them.
Trying to just answer also your question in very little time. I think for me, the vision of what's next after all of this, which I hope is very, very soon, but anyway, is a sense of belonging. I mean, it's the challenge that we have when we talk about gender inequality. I mean, there are a lot of binary terms. It's going to be unequal versus equal. It's including versus excluding. It's minorities, majorities, and so on. And so there is always someone left out in whichever aspect that you look at. And I think this sense of creating belonging and really belonging to the music industry, that we all have space in it, and it's not about removing something from someone, as you were saying, like it's creating more, therefore someone has less. No, not at all. We can all have pieces in it, or big pieces. I mean, whatever role you want to have, you can have. That's not, I'm not trying to take anything away from any man in that respect. I mean, if they want to shine and do stuff and be brilliant, great.
I think we are trying to take something of power. I think
of power, yes, but it's not about men. It's about the power redistribution. It's very different, and I think that's also something to really make clear to people. It's not about taking it away from them. Indeed, if they are oppressing. Anyway, trying to be very polite right now. If they are oppressors and they overuse their power, of course, something has to change. But if it's not about their identity, and I think this creating belonging, and this allows for more creativity, this allows for dreaming indeed, this allows for just another world of possibles that we don't know. But this is at least opening that door and saying that, yes, we are all welcome in there, and we will keep that door open. And it's not about, again, including on one way and excluding the others, is for me the fundament of what will be next. Small step.
Thank you.
Small step, major revolution. It's either or.
Okay.
It's hard to add something new after Marie, but I see somewhere in the future more interesting and more powerful and more diverse music scene, full of where is a proper place for a new phenomenon, and I hope that will be possible.
Thank you so much for this conversation. I hope it's not the last one. It's just the beginning of many conversations in Poland. To leave our audience with some positive information. Tomorrow during the conference we will have a workshop that will be gathering conference audience, guests and participants, men and women, so it will be very diverse, international, interdisciplinary, and we will be running a foresight workshop to plan some steps for future. So I think maybe this is a good information at the beginning, at the end. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.